views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I hope you and your families are healthy and well. I know it's a challenging summer this summer, keeping everyone occupied, but at least for my family, there have been some unique opportunities for us to slow down and spend quality time with one another. So I hope that all of you are enjoying those moments as well. My name is Adrienne Austin. I'm your Deputy Chancellor for the Division of Community Empowerment, Partnerships, and Communications, and I will be your moderator for this evening. Thank you for joining us tonight for this information session about New York City's plans to return to school. It is important that all of our families are able to participate tonight, and we are very grateful to the Spanish and Mandarin interpreters who are with us on a separate line. So thank you to Yaelin Montiel and Jessica Zito, who are our Spanish interpreters, and thank you to Zhao Chun Yang and Shi Feng, who are our Mandarin interpreters. We will now introduce instructions in Spanish and Mandarin for attendees who may wish to dial into the interpretation lines at this time. Yaelin Montiel, can you please provide the instructions in Spanish?
Good evening, everybody. The following message is going to be in Spanish, offering interpretation services. Buenas noches a todos. Gracias por estar acá. Si desea servicios de interpretación en español, por favor, marque desde su teléfono al 1-888-475-4499 e ingrese el PIN 735-255-0102. Le repito, marque desde su teléfono al 888-475-4499 e ingrese el número de identificación personal PIN 735-255-0102. Si desea escuchar audio en español, pero desea permanecer en esta sala de conferencias virtual de Zoom para poder ver la reunión desde su computadora, por favor recuerde silenciar todos sus dispositivos y disminuir el volumen de su computadora y marcar desde su teléfono a la línea de conferencia en español. Nuevamente, la línea de conferencia en español es 888-475-4499 e ingrese el PIN 735-255-0102. Gracias.
Thank you, Yaelin. Zhao Chun Yang, can you please provide the instructions in Mandarin?
普通话家长请拨打电话888-475-4499，并输入密码933-059-6663。我再重复一遍，普通话家长请输入电话号码888-475-4499，并拨打密码933-059-6663。另外呢，在会议期间，请大家保持静音。我再讲一下，我们的电话号码是888-475-4499，密码933-059-6663。谢谢 ，Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, my name is Adrienne Austin, and I'm your moderator for this evening, and I'm really excited about tonight's family and student information session. I will now provide details on how tonight's community meeting will work. All participants will be able to listen to this meeting via computer audio or by phone. We've received over 3,000 questions in advance of this meeting, and we've identified commonly raised issues which we will try to address tonight. If your question does not get answered tonight, or if you have additional questions, there are additional resources for you. Please go to our website. Our website is at www.schools.nyc.gov, and if you click on the Return to School banner, there's more information there, and we're updating it as quickly as we can. 2, your school principal will be in touch with school-specific plans, so please be on the lookout for emails or phone calls, voicemails from your principal about those meetings. And then finally, we have 2 citywide information sessions in August. One will be held on Wednesday, August 12th, and one will be on Thursday, August 27th. Both events are going to be held at the same time as tonight's session from 6:30 to 8, and you can register on our website. Thank you all for being here. It is now my honor and privilege to introduce our New York City's School Chancellor, Richard Carranza.
Thank you, Deputy Chancellor Austin. And I want to thank everyone that's on this call tonight. Thank you and good evening. Thank you for being here. I hope you and your children are enjoying some time together this summer. And I'm glad that you've joined us because September will be here before we know it. And as we head towards the start of school, my entire team and I are committed to keeping you constantly updated on what the 2021 school year will look like. We want you to know what's happening and how you can continue to be part of the conversation. I can also assure you that my team is working around the clock to develop and clarify operations for the fall. And this is not an easy task. The last information, let me give you an example. The last information session we had, I gave the context. And the context was of the 10 largest school systems in America, there were only 2 that could even contemplate in-person learning because of the reduced number of positive cases in their community. In other words, 2 communities had actually flattened the curve, and that was New York and Chicago. As I speak to you tonight, there is now only 1 of the 10 largest school communities in America that can even contemplate in-person learning. That's New York City, because our positive infection rate continues to hover between 1% and 2%. And that's due to you, because you have not politicized wearing a mask, because you wash your hands, because you stay in, because you don't congregate, because you maintain social distancing. That's all because of you. And that allows us to even have the conversation about what will in-person learning look like. Everybody else, their rates are skyrocketing. We're not in that case. So it's an honor to be able to have this conversation with you. Now, I will tell you that we've accomplished a lot, and tonight we are going to continue to be transparent about what we know and what we don't yet know, because just like I've just mentioned, the last meeting, there were 2, now there's 1, next meeting there may be 3 or none. So this continues to evolve, and that's why we want to be transparent with all of you. One thing that you can bank on is that the health and the safety of our students, our staff, our community will always come first. It will always be first for our students, our staff, and our families. So as we think about that, New York student, I want to make very clear that come September, New York City students will be learning 5 days a week, whether that's in person and some modicum of in person or at home. Earlier this month, we announced that schools are planning for a blended learning environment. And this means that students will be taught in school buildings for a part of the week and continue learning remotely from home on the other days of the week. We know that the majority of families want as much in-person instruction as is safely possible. We want that too. And we're going to continue to work with schools to maximize it at every turn while staying consistent with the health and safety requirements to keep our staff, our students, and our families safe. But any family can also choose right now an all remote learning environment for any reason, with your child learning from home 5 days a week. If this is your preference, please let us know by August 7th so schools can plan accordingly. Visit schools.nyc.gov/return to school 2020, or simply call 311. So how can you be empowered to make that choice? We put up some comparisons of the different models on our website. There are, of course, some differences, but one thing we want to be really clear about, and we want to be really consistent. If you choose all remote learning, your child will still be enrolled in and part of your school community. Their schedule and learning experience will be fully managed by your school. And the great majority of students who learn 100% remotely will be taught by teachers from their school. There may be some exceptions, of course, but if you choose all remote learning instruction, you will be able to opt back into blended learning on a quarterly basis throughout the school year beginning in November. Finally, I also want to note that students who learn 100% remotely will have live instruction with teachers every day, and every class will include live instruction. This is directly because of the feedback you've given us. We are also working to ensure live instruction for students in blended learning on each day that they are learning remotely. There's more information about remote and blended learning on our website. Just visit schools.nyc.gov. And in the past week, we also posted information about how we'll safely teach special subjects like arts, physical education, and in-person learning. So please visit schools.nyc.gov to learn more. That's being updated on a daily basis, sometimes on an hourly basis. Now, I want to kick off your questions. And one last thing, a very important reminder, we're moving full steam ahead on making these plans and working hard to figure everything out. We also know that we have to be nimble. We also know that we will make our decisions based on the latest data and health guidance. We will continue to work hand in hand with our mayor, our governor, and partner agencies to monitor the situation and make decisions for New York City based on what the data is telling us. We're going to depend on science, not science fiction. Science will guide how we will move forward. We may have to make adjustments as public health conditions continue to evolve, but students will always be learning 5 days a week, and we're 100% committed to the health and safety of our students, our teachers, our staff, and our families. Now, the conversation doesn't end when this information session ends. Every week, we will be posting more information on school operations to the schools.nyc.gov/Return to School 2020. There are 2 more information sessions like this one, and our Deputy Chancellor Austin has already said Wednesday, August 12th and Thursday, August 27th. In addition, each school will be hosting a parent meeting to discuss a proposed school schedule and to review planning for the year ahead. We will be holding community and advocate roundtable meetings as well as briefings with the Community Education Council leaders and elected officials and more. So, okay, I'm pleased to say that our executive superintendents have also joined this call, and I want to thank them for being here so that we can answer any questions that you may have. So I want to take just a moment to introduce them. We have Misha Ross Porter from the Bronx. Thank you, Misha, for being here. Karen Watts from Brooklyn North. Barbara Freeman from Brooklyn South. Marisol Rosales from Manhattan. Mabel Muniz Sardui from Queens North. Rachel Lewis as our rep from Queens South. Chris Anzalone, a rep from Staten Island, and Timothy Lasante, Access Schools. So I want to thank all of our executive superintendents for being here. As questions come in, I may phone a friend, and you are the friend. And thank you for all you do for our families and our students and our school community. So with that, again, I want to thank you for being on this webinar, and I'll turn it over to our Deputy Chancellor, Adrian Austin, to facilitate our questions. Adrian.
Thank you, Chancellor. First, I want to say a couple of words about how we're managing the questions tonight. We received a lot of questions from families and students in advance of the meeting, and many of those questions asked about the same topics. So we selected a sampling that represents what many people asked. When I read the questions, I will identify who asked it and read the question exactly as it was written. I'm going to ask each executive superintendent to say a few words about what's happening in their community, and then I will ask them a question or two from a family member who lives in their borough. So with that, I would like to welcome our executive superintendent, Misha Ross Porter from Bronx, Bronx Strong. Misha, welcome. Please tell us a little bit about what is happening in the Bronx in preparation for reopening.
Thank you, Deputy Chancellor Austin and Chancellor Carranza, and all of my ES family and all of New York City that's joining us tonight. We are really excited. I'm excited to be joining and representing the Bronx, and we are really focused at this moment on ensuring that our families are part of this very important decision-making process. Our principals are hosting town halls. We just met with our CEC presidents last week, and so right now, our priority is ensuring that our parents are a part of this decision-making process, because what we know and what we've said over and over again in the Bronx is this is not a moment about our school system, this is a moment about our community. And so how are we coming together with parents, with our CBO partners, with our elected officials, with our amazing parent leaders who have stepped up in so many amazing ways. And so that is our priority right now, is ensuring that our parents have an active voice in the decision making that is happening right now. And I'm just really proud to be a part of this team and excited to know that we have an opportunity to open in person, but clear that we are focused in on listening to the science and making the right decision for every family in New York City.
Thank you, Misha. So I have a few questions from Bronx parents. I'm going to start with a question from Lynette Cruz from District 7. And she wants to know, will remote learning be available without having to physically attend the school?
So thank you, Lynette from D7. And remote learning is an option available for every New York City public school student. And so families that right now the survey is open, and so families can opt into remote learning through the Learning Preference Survey, and it's due August 7th. And I'm just gonna push parents to get those in. I know it's a tough time to be making decisions, but we're all trying to make decisions about decisions and about decisions. And so let's get those Learning Preference Surveys in so we know how to prepare for all of our families.
Thank you. And I'm going to also ask you a question from Damaris Medina from District 8. And she asks, if a parent chooses all remote learning, will it be administered by their school and the teachers of that school?
Yeah, so Damaris, you are always a part of your school. So I just think it's really important. There have been a lot of questions from parents about, if I'm remote, does that mean I'm going to have teachers from other schools and I'm not going to be connected? And I can tell you principals and teachers are anxious to get connected with their families. And so you will absolutely be a part of your school. Your child, if he or she is enrolled in remote learning, is enrolled in remote learning at the school community that they're a part of. Their schedule, their learning experiences, all will be managed by their school. And we know that a majority of our students who learn remotely they will absolutely be taught by teachers from their school. However, there may be some exceptions. We've had a lot of changes in our system and we are dealing with a lot of uncertainties. But what is important is you will be a part of your school community. And I'm going to be working closely with my district superintendents and principals to ensure that they choose the best program model possible for all of our families. So we're looking forward to welcoming you back, Damaris, and your families to not only to the DOE, because we want to welcome you to our large family and our Bronx Strong family, but also to your school family.
Okay, and we have another question. It's similar to the first question. It's from Lynette Cruz from District 7, who wants to know, Letitia McKellar from District 7, how do I go about having my children be fully remote learning?
Yeah. So Letitia, all you have to do is fill out the web form, which I'm sure is available somewhere in cyberspace right now at schools.nyc.gov/return-to-school-2020, or just call 311. I know that I've definitely heard from Bronx families that sometimes there's been some internet access. So I want to push and let everybody know that 311 is absolutely an option and a way to communicate with us. So don't ever feel like you can't reach us. We're a 311 away if you can't get to us through the internet.
Thank you so much, Executive Superintendent Ross Porter. I would now like to introduce our Executive Superintendent for Brooklyn North, Karen Watts. Karen, can you let us know what districts are in Brooklyn North and give us an overview of what's happening in those districts to plan for the fall?
Thank you, DC Austin. Good evening, Chancellor Carranza, colleagues, and all parents, students, and community members joining us this evening. I'm Karen Watts, Executive Superintendent of Brooklyn North, including the community school districts 13, 14, 15, 16, 19, 23, 32, and the high schools in those districts. I'm pleased to be in community with you and to answer questions regarding school reopening. We had a strong end to the 1920 school year, and our students in summer school are continuing to learn, and schools across Brooklyn North are preparing for a strong start to the 2021 school year. They will be selecting a programming model and plan a strong kickoff for the school year that will include social, emotional, and academic supports so that we can accelerate learning for all students during the next school year. As well, later you will hear from my colleague in Brooklyn South, Executive Superintendent Barbara Freeman, who has the other half of the borough of Brooklyn, but we do collaborate on special projects across Brooklyn. And one such project that is going on this summer is the One Brooklyn television channel in partnership with Brick Media Arts, where we have broadcasted wonderful artifacts of excellence from remote learning all across Brooklyn. We have aired some of our graduation ceremonies, the wonderful visual arts and performing arts of our students, and we will be broadcasting standards-aligned lessons that infuse social emotional learning for the remainder of the summer. and into the new school year so that our students can continue to learn. As well, we are sharing educational information for all of our parents around important topics that include the Beyond Access series for special education and Know Your Rights series for multilingual learners. Parents and students, please tune in to One Brooklyn TV. More information is available on our Brooklyn North Strong Schools website.
Excellent, Karen. Thank you so much for sharing that information. I have a question here from a parent, Monica McDonald from District 16, and she wants to know what a typical blended school week will look like.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. McDonald, for that question. Well, a typical blended school week is going to be dependent on many factors, including space, the number of students registering for all remote, and staffing numbers. Principals will choose one model and communicate that to families in August. Having said that, we've shared 3 models that we are asking principals to choose from in collaboration with their communities and all stakeholders. I would like to take a moment to go over the 3 models. Model 1 assumes a minimum of 50% of students will be attending in person at certain times during the week. Students will receive in person for the same 2 days every week and every other Monday. There will be 3 groups total, and 1 group is all remote. For Model 2, it assumes that 33% of the students in the school will be in person, and that will be 1 day. They will have the same each week with rotating Mondays and Tuesdays on a 3-week cycle. For example, 1 cohort will consistently come to school Wednesday, 1 Thursday, and 1 Friday. And then those 3 cohorts would rotate Monday and Tuesdays. Model 3 also assumes 33% of students, but only for middle and high schools. There will be a 6-day rotation, in person once every 4 days, or in person 2 days out of 6. High schools are used this kind of planning already. Example, 1 cohort comes Monday and Tuesday 1 week, then 2 more cycles of 2 days, so that the same cohort comes again the following Tuesday and Wednesday, repeats over course of weeks on 6-day cycles. There are another 2 models for District 75 communities to choose from, which reflect the unique needs and challenges of our multiply disabled students in those schools. Back to you, DC Austin.
Thank you. And perfect timing, Executive Superintendent Freeman. I was just going to turn to you to tell us a little bit about Brooklyn South. What districts are in Brooklyn South, and what are your districts doing to plan for the fall?
So good evening, and thank you, DC Austin and Chancellor Carranza. Good evening. And I just am so happy to just be able to be here tonight. Hoping all is well with everyone's families. Thank you to my colleagues in this work. And the fact that we are working towards having a great reopening of school that primarily will address the health and safety of our students and staff. I'm excited to say that we have made opportunities out of this difficult time with our friends in Brooklyn North and our collaborations. We have continued to do our yoga and wellness work, which between the 2 offices, we have trained and have licensed a number of individuals that are able to provide those kinds of resources to our staffs and our schools. We have been on TV and social media supporting families and students and staff on Wednesdays and Fridays. We also are reigniting and relaunching our Brooklyn Basics work that addresses our youngest citizens in this city, 0 to 3. in their preparation of being school ready for kindergarten. Our work is consistent. Karen has the northern section. I have the southern section, districts 17, 18, 20, 21, and 22, and the high schools that are corresponding. And so the specific work in Brooklyn South is really us doubling down on our commitment to the Chancellor's priority of developing people and the core value of interdependence and our reliance on each other as we work through the difficult decisions that have to be made and the support that has to go on for schools as we enter a new frontier in education as we know it. And so we always are working under the theory of action of supporting excellence will yield excellence for our students. And so we have focused our work on intense supports for social emotional learning, which certainly includes the aspect of trauma. We are providing multiple learning opportunities for our staff, especially staff relating to our English language learners and our students with disabilities. And we have also been able to find the stars in our BCOs that support our professional learning around technology. So please check us out on YouTube and social media and on our website of Brooklyn South at Strong Schools. We're busy getting ourselves prepared for the work that's in front of us. So thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to the questions this evening.
Thank you, Barbara. And so we have a question from a parent in District 22, Adele Abdullah, who wants to know, are there any plans to cancel the pre-K program, or will it fall under the same rules as K-8?
Oh, Adele, please rest assured that pre-K is not canceled. Reopening plans for our early childhood programs will vary by the setting. For district elementary schools and pre-K centers, we are using the same guidance and considerations as we are with school openings, and center-based and family daycare and childcare programs are governed by the city and state regulations. So they might look and seem a little different depending on who manages those services. But of course, we're working very closely with our colleagues in the Division of Early Childhood to think through all of the appropriate guidance for these young children. So we're going full ahead.
Thank you so much for that, Barbara. Chancellor, I'm going to bring you in. We have gotten a lot of questions about PPE and whether we're going to have the little ones wear masks. And so I'm just wondering if you can share what's the current planning on PPE and mask wearing for our young people.
So again, we're going to be as conservative as possible because health and safety of all of our children are first and foremost. So at this point, we are planning that all individuals, everybody that is breathing in a building will wear PPE. So that means a mask. We're educators, so we will educate our children around how to use PPE. I know there's a lot of commentary out there about, can younger children really keep PPE in on? Yes, we've already ordered PPE for younger children. I can tell you that I have personally visited our rec centers over the last 5 months, and young children have been able to keep that PPE on, the mask, social distancing, etc. It's not easy, but it requires a lot of very tender but very deliberate education to our children to understand why they need to do that to keep themselves safe and others safe. So yes, the current planning is that we will continue to require PPE for all individuals in indoor spaces.
Thank you, Chancellor. I am now going to introduce our Executive Superintendent from Manhattan, Marisol Rosales. Marisol, if you could tell us a little bit about what's happening in Manhattan, what are the plans for the fall?
Absolutely. Thank you. Super excited to be here representing the Manhattan team, our 7 amazing superintendents overseeing districts 1 through 6 and the high school, and grounded on our 116,000 students. I hope everyone in this call is safe and well. And my thoughts are with those of you who have been impacted directly by this pandemic. Something that has resonated with me as we lead through this crisis is the need for connectedness, communication, hope, and safety. And so I do want to say thank you to our Chancellor and DC Austin for creating this forum on behalf of the communities we serve together. And what I would like to highlight about Manhattan is our collective leadership grounded in humanity. I definitely want to shout out all of our Manhattan Borough Office staff, our superintendents, their teams, our community education councils, our presidents' councils, parent leaders, principals, teachers, staff, and families. Our superintendents and BCO are mobilizing supports for principals, teachers, families, and students. We are offering trainings across Manhattan to ensure that our principals and their staff are equipped and ready to reopen their schools. I also want to say that our CECs, superintendents and principals, and I continue to create platforms for families. We will soon be launching a series of workshops on blended learning, social, emotional, and trauma-informed practices for our families across Manhattan, because that has been the ask on their part. And while we're planning ahead, I want to shout out our exceptional leaders in the ground. Our food staff are serving approximately 82,000 meals per day at our 57 meal hubs. Our regional enrichment center staff, we have 10 across Manhattan serving 600 amazing children. And not only are they serving our children, but we, as our Chancellor shared, we are learning so much from them and their practices since we opened them in the spring. I am really excited to be here with my colleagues, with you, with our Chancellor, to offer any information, support our perspective from our boroughs, while really listening and learning from our families. So thank you, DC Austin.
Thank you, Marisol. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So we have a question from one of our parents in Manhattan, Alfredo Espinosa, who says, and it's both comment and question, please make it mandatory for principals to clearly explain to families what the choices are for in-person versus remote learning at their school, and at least 1 week before the August 7th deadline. So can you talk a little bit about what you think it would be helpful, what we can convey to parents to help them make that decision, and then what's in the works to be able to communicate out to our families in Manhattan what's happening so they can make this important decision by August 7th?
Yeah, thank you, Alfredo Espinosa. And it goes back to our collective leadership and how this is a collective effort, right? So as I shared earlier, principals across Manhattan have actually been convening their communities to reflect on the work from the fall regarding remote learning. And they're listening to our families about reopening. Principals are also meeting with their respective school leadership teams. One thing that I want to make sure is clear, Alfredo, is that because we're asking principals to make these decisions with families and staff that present a choice of remote learning in a specific blended model prior to August 7th, it is not possible, right? Principals have been asked to take into consideration a number of factors in determining the best models for their schools. Some of those factors include the percentage of families who choose remote learning. Some of those factors include the physical capacity of the school and all of the logistics of managing safety and health mandates. Once they have identified these factors, principals will be able to choose the best model for their school. And this is not an easy task, right? And principals need to have the information before making a decision. Again, this is a collective effort that requires everyone's support. So continue to communicate with your principals, your superintendents, and me in terms of what you believe the needs are, so that we can work with you. And it's going to be really critical that you share whether you're opting into remote learning so that principals can make these sound decisions. Thank
you, Marisol. The next question is from Jenny Lee in District 2, and I'm actually going to ask our Chancellor to respond to this. It's a difficult question. If conditions worsen by September 10th, would the DOE decide to move to a full remote model for those who have pre-chosen blended model?
Absolutely. So health and safety always comes first. So we will not put any student, a staff member, or family member in a position of danger. And we've seen, and again, in my opening remarks, I talked about the last session that we had. New York and Chicago were in a position to even consider in-person learning. Chicago now has moved with a spike in positive cases, so they can't even consider that. So again, health and safety is always going to drive the decisions that we make. We know, and let me just be very clear, that we are choosing from a portfolio of bad decisions because they don't meet the needs of all our families and students. I mean, we would all like to be 100% back in buildings, back to what we knew before COVID-19 was a factor. Absent a vaccine, we know that that's just not realistic. So we're choosing from a portfolio of bad choices, and we're trying to choose the least bad choice for every school community. In addition, look, I've worked in 4 other school systems across the country, and there are some school systems that have much newer buildings that we have. So they have much different layouts that give them options to social distance and have ventilation and all of those things that pertain to health and safety. New York City has a very historic portfolio of school buildings. We have some buildings that are 125 years old. So we have particular challenges that our colleagues across the country don't have. But what we do have is the current knowledge of knowing that because of everything you've done, with all of the social distancing, wearing your mask, washing your hands, staying indoors, doing all of the things that our health professionals have said, we've gone from being the epicenter of the epicenter in America for COVID-19 community transmission to now being the least transmissive community in America. That's a good thing. So we're going to continue to plan on in-person learning because of the work that you've done. But at any given moment, and the mayor has been very clear about this, I've been very clear about this, if the science, not the science fiction, if the science indicates that the numbers are going in the wrong direction, we will not go into in-person learning.
Thank you, Chancellor. I would now like to introduce our Executive Superintendent for Queens North, Mabel Sardoui, and also a representative from Queens.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chancellor Carranza, Deputy Austin, my colleagues. It's great to be in community with each and every one of you. I have the privilege of leading 166 schools in partnership with my fabulous superintendents. From District 24, I have Madeline Chang. From District 25, I have Superintendent Domingo. From District 26, I have Superintendent Junta. And from District 30, I have Superintendent Composto. And for the high schools in those districts, we have Superintendent Lindsay. In partnership, we have 144,000 students, and the home languages that we have are Spanish at 63%, Chinese at 21%, Bengali at 5%, Arabic at 3%, and Korean at 2%. Over the summer, we have been providing professional learning in the areas of cultural responsive and sustaining education, as well as blended learning, needs assessments, multilingual learning standalone for teachers, best practices for our multilingual learners, and a remote learning series for Chinese bilingual teachers. Our superintendents are working in partnership with our principals and having town hall meetings throughout this month. And I have had the pleasure of going to some of those town halls where the principals are sharing with their communities the programs that they would like to offer come September. In addition, we have summer school that's going on in Queens North, and the children and the teachers are doing well, and I'll talk about that a little later as I answer some of your questions. Thank you for being in community with all of us today. And I hope that you're safe with your family, and please check on your neighbors, especially our elderly folks with this heat.
Guess I'll jump in while DC Austin is getting back on. Good evening, parents, Chancellor, DC Austin, and Executive Superintendents. My name is Rochelle Lewis. I'm the Director of Student Services from Queens South, which covers districts 27, 28, and 29, including the high schools. I bring greetings and well wishes to you and your families from the Queens South Executive Director, Marlene Wilkes, and all of our superintendents, Ambert, Pate, Mitchell, and Mendez, and the directors. At this moment, each of our district and high school superintendents are working tirelessly to support the summer programming and ensure that each of the school leaders are ready to welcome our students and staff back in the safest manner possible for the upcoming school year. Just to kind of note some of the items that Queens South is working on, our district and high school superintendents are working with their president's councils, CEC, and local officials to provide ongoing feedback in response to community concerns as we engage in the reentry process. Within our borough citywide offices, our teams are working to support the summer programming as well as reentry. Our E&L division has created a number of parent-facing documents to help support L engagement for families and support the navigation through the remote learning process. Our special education department has collaborated with Queens North to plan for the extended school year, the ESY program, and is working with the teachers and paras on a weekly basis to provide consistent professional learning sessions and communication to ensure the success of all of our students. As a Queens South family, we are all engaged in learning and sharing best practices around instruction, trauma, resiliency, and self-care to support all of our students, parents, school staff, and the community.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Ardui and Ms. Lewis. I know that Adrian is just about to rejoin us, but I'm going to read the question from District 25 from Olga Matsumakis. Will any planned remote learning be improved from what we experienced from March through June? How will it be improved? For example, where there'll be live teaching feeds. What is the plan to help our children learn and build the foundation for real growth in their education?
So thank you for your question. In the last few months during remote learning, we've learned a great deal. I want to say from March and April, it was very challenging for our schools, for our teachers, for our parents, for our students. But by May and June, we were rolling and we were doing much, much better. And I want to thank the teachers and the principals and the parents for working together in partnership and in community so that remote learning was a good experience for your child. We did have some challenges, and we're taking those lessons and we're learning and strengthening these practices. We're working with teachers to better set up success, including more training for them. We are also moving more into live instruction, also called synchronous instruction. We are implemented in synchronous instruction in the summer school and are looking at schools at best scale across the entire system. And today I had the pleasure of being in District 26, where I visited many of the classes, and all of the classes were doing synchronous learning and teaching. And last week this week was District 26, so I applaud everyone in District 26. And last week I was in District 25, and again, more and more teachers are doing more synchronous teaching as they develop their skills. So we're really proud and working towards success in this area.
Thank you, Mabel. Quick question about synchronous and asynchronous instruction. I know those are sort of technical terms. Can you break those down for everyone who's listening, and then also give us examples of what that looks like?
Okay, so synchronous learning is online or distance learning, and it happens in real time live. So I shared with you that this morning, I was in District 26, and I saw a teacher, Ortiz, who was teaching a 3rd grade ELA class, and they were doing lit camp, and the theme was courage. And children, the teacher was live, providing examples and building vocabulary and comprehension, and so were the children. And the children were encouraged to open up their cameras so that we can see their beautiful faces. So that's synchronous live instruction. Asynchronous learning occurs through online channels without real-time interaction. So teachers can post assignments, teachers can have students work in small groups or in individual projects so that children work at their own pace. And that's asynchronous learning.
Thank you so much for that, Mabel. Safety and cleanliness are on a lot of people's minds. They're the top concern for our parents. And so I'm going to read a couple of questions on the topic and then ask our chancellor to respond to those. So for District 27, Lisa Castellan wants to know, if corona cases rise again during the start of the school year, how prepared are the schools to take action for our children's safety?
Yeah, so we're working through a very detailed protocol right now. There's going to be more information coming out in the next few days about what that will look like in terms of how many cases, what does that look like in terms of identifying, test and trace, et cetera. I think what's really important to understand is that for us, first and foremost, health and safety of our students and staff is of the paramount importance. So everything that we're doing around in-person instruction revolves around a constant monitoring of what the conditions are, and then a constant monitoring of what is the response to any potential case. So obviously there's test and trace, there's also temperature taking, there's also PPE distribution, there's having pods of students so that students are together throughout the school day so that if, in fact, God forbid, there is a positive case, we know who they've been interacting with, and then test and trace can very quickly do an assessment of, is anybody else in danger? So all of those things are the things that we're working through right now with our epidemiologists and medical professionals to make sure we have a solid plan for what that looks like if and when, or God forbid, any positive cases should become known to us.
Thank you, Chancellor. And along those same lines, one of our parents, Faith Webster from District 27, wants to know about our school custodians and whether additional custodians are going to be hired and what cleaning is going to look like in our schools.
Yeah, so great question. So I can only tell you what the answer is. Number one, yes. Health and safety is first. So that means we're going to put all of our resources into making sure that we have health and safety. But I can tell you that visiting the rec centers that we've had over these last 5 months for the children of first responders, medical professionals, etc., essential workers, I can tell you that in every one of these rec centers, there are 3 or 4 people who have a spray bottle and a rag with disinfectant walking 24/7, disinfecting rails, disinfecting knobs on doors, disinfecting common areas. They're spraying and wiping all day long. Now, is that important for us? Yes, because we've had a very successful rec experience based on the cleaning protocols that we put in place. Now, add to that the electrostatic disinfectors that we've ordered. We've got half of them already in for the 1,800 schools we have. The other half will be here within a number of weeks. That adds a whole other level of very sophisticated cleaning devices to what we're doing. Add to that the additional PPE that we've ordered for all of our schools. That is set to arrive in the next few weeks. Add to that the additional sanitary or sanitation supplies that we're providing to every school classroom, disinfectant wipes, disinfectant sprays, towels, pumps with disinfectant. So we are very much preparing for a very cleanly environment in every one of our schools. So one thing I would say to parents is make sure you load up on a lot of lanolin lotion because your kids are going to be having lots of disinfectant on their hands all day long.
Thank you very much, Chancellor, for that. Now I want to introduce our Borough Support Officer, Christopher Anzalone from Staten Island. Christopher, we've got a few questions for you. The first is from a parent, Pauline Izzo. If a vaccine becomes available mid-year, or if by some miracle coronavirus disappears off of the face of the earth, will schools be able to be in person full-time? That actually sounds a little bit like a Chancellor question. So I think what I'm going to do is, Chancellor, if you can open that one up, I think that's only fair.
Look, if there's a vaccine that becomes available, hallelujah, absolutely, right? But it's not just a vaccine becoming available. It's, how soon can we get everybody vaccinated? How soon can we get, we know that there are some families that don't believe in vaccines. So what is going to be the plan for families that don't want to be vaccinated? Well, you can't be part of in-person learning if you're not vaccinated. So listen, we are all rooting for a vaccine. That being said, we also have to be very sober-minded about making sure that we have safe and secure learning environments that utilize all of the safety protocols that our medical professionals have told us, so that even when we have a vaccine, and even if we could assume everybody gets vaccinated, we still have safety health protocols in place until we know that those are robust. They are, I think the term of art in the public space is herd immunity. It's a little difficult for me to call our kids herd immunity, but that's the term, herd immunity. And again, we're going to be guided by the science, not science fiction, not what people say, right? So again, we're hoping for a vaccine. If that happens, that clears a lot of pathway for us to be in in-person learning at 100%.
Thank you very much, Chancellor, for answering that difficult question. Now I'm going to ask Christopher Anzalone if you can give us an overview of what's happening in Staten Island to prepare for the fall.
Sure, thank you, DC Austin and Chancellor Carranza. So I'm here representing Executive Superintendent Anthony Ladico. I wanted to start by thanking everyone for joining us tonight and being a true partner throughout the pandemic. So like many of my colleagues on Staten Island, we have been working on making sure that all voices are heard so that we can best serve the Staten Island community. Our principals have been doing an amazing job in making sure that they're getting feedback and insight from their PTA, their SLT, their students and families. And we're also very fortunate to have an amazing superintendent's team led by Superintendent Vincenzo Galasio, who leads the 70+ schools on Staten Island that serves 3K through 12th grade, and my fantastic PCO team. We're lucky enough to truly work in collaboration and always in what is in the best interest of our students and the Staten Island community as a whole.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to now ask you a question from one of our parents, Ziomara Ortiz, and she wants to know, where will the kids eat lunch? How will they be separated in their classroom?
Absolutely. So grab-and-go meals will be available for every student for both breakfast and lunch, and students will also be allowed to bring their own food, their own lunch if needed. So we'll be enforcing social distancing throughout the building, throughout the day. That includes lunch, of course, to make sure that our kids are always safe. We're encouraging principals to use classrooms to minimize the interaction between groups of students during lunch, but we will be working with schools that have to use those cafeterias and making sure that all those safety measures are still in place, even if they do have to use those larger spaces.
Thank you very much for that, Christopher. And before we go to our Executive Superintendent for Access Schools, Timothy Lasante, I just wanted to ask the Chancellor, I know it's a question we're getting a lot from parents, for students who are opting for remote only, do we know how lunch is going to work for those students?
Again, we're working through the details of that, but we've had a very robust grab-and-go operation that we're seeing how can we continue to have a grab-and-go for students that are in remote learning mode. But just, I want to add to what Chris said as well, because Chris was right on the money. But most people, if I was a parent, and I've been a parent of the public school student, but if I was a parent, I'd say, wait a minute, why are the classrooms going to be the first option for my child having lunch? They need the social interaction. They need to be with other kids. Yes, we get that. But consider this. If there is a positive case that happens from a test and trace perspective, we have to know what is that cohort of kids that that student has been part of, because that limits then the ability, it enables us to very quickly be able to do an analysis of who else has been around, who's had exposure, who is exhibiting any other conditions, and that helps us to then identify, without that cohort being exposed to the entire school, who we need to prioritize and look at. So it's really from a health and safety perspective. And again, I just want to say to parents very transparently that this is not a regular school year environment that we're looking at. Until we have a proven vaccine, this is not a traditional school environment. This is very much playing the defensive to making sure that we can quickly follow up, we can quickly test and trace, we can quickly assess how big of an issue this is in a school community. That's why we have to limit some of the freedom that we've all been accustomed to in terms of a school, okay? Now, that being said, we also don't want it to be a total lockdown situation for our students. So that's why principals and their instructional leadership teams are so critically important, because schools will have different permutations of what it will look like in their schools, and we want to support that. But again, the lens that we're looking at, the mega lens that we're looking at, is health and safety, test and trace, keeping everybody safe, and how do we be nimble and very, I would say, proactive in being able to address any issues that result.
Thank you very much for that clarity, Chancellor. It is now my pleasure to bring on our Executive Superintendent, Timothy Lasante. Mr. Lasante, can you please tell us a little bit about the students that you serve and how you've been working with those students during the pandemic and your plans for the fall?
Yeah, thank you. We're very excited about talking to you tonight about three big areas of opportunity within Access Schools. The first one is career and technical education. When I started in the system in 1978, we called it vocational ed. Now it's called career and technical education. And we're very proud during the epidemic, students remotely earned contact tracing certification, which immediately led to employment at $25 an hour. And they did this all remotely, got it online, and now they're working. And this is all during the pandemic. We're very excited that we have CTE, Career and Technical Education, in all 5 boroughs. Our major site is in East Harlem, where there's 21 trades under one roof at Co-op Tech. And I'm very proud to announce that Co-op Tech, 49% of the school, half the school, are students with disabilities. They're very welcoming of all students, very inclusive classes, cooperative learning taking place in every single trade area. I'm very proud to announce this year that over $1 million went into the pockets of our students in District 79 and Co-op Tech for internships. These internships led to employment in 100 different cases. So we were able to continue the internships through the pandemic and through the summer youth employment, and we're going to do it again in the fall semester. So again, career and technical education is all free, and I'm encouraging everybody to, if they're interested, to take CET courses if they're over 17 and through adult ed at any age. And as Misha said, we get a lot of 311 calls. It's the easiest way to get us, or to go on to D79, District 79, D79.com. The second big area I want to talk to everybody about is English language learners. We brought in students 17 and older from 100 different countries last year and 34 different states, which is pretty interesting. People gravitate to come to New York. And we're very happy to announce that the International Schools Network will be under Access next year. We really want to learn from them. There's 10 international high schools throughout New York City, and we want to ramp up our services to multi-language learners. And the last area is the high school diploma students and the high school equivalency. It used to be known as the GED. And I'm very proud to announce and thank the Chancellor's office and the Mayor's office. Today, we, for the first time since March, offered the high school equivalency test here in Brooklyn. Why that's important is this. The students who take that test today and tomorrow, it's a 2-day test, will have the opportunity to go to college in September. If we would have sat back and waited, they would not have been able to go to school in the next semester. They would have had to wait till February. So it was really important for us to be the first in New York State to offer the high school equivalency test just today here in New York. So that was a great thing. Again, over 1,500 adults passed that test this year. Those are folks over the age of 21. And our whole goal, and not to bury the lead, is to have students graduate. Our vision is 0 dropouts. And we have 51 transfer schools, which means that those are schools which students transfer in from a high school. And sometimes they need 5 years to graduate. And sometimes they need 6 years. But we don't give up on students. They don't give up on themselves. So again, our whole mission is to have everybody graduate. We're very excited. And again, if you want more information, d79.com or 311. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. I'm now going to go back to our Executive Superintendent, Ross Porter, for this question. We received a question about how will you know enough teachers, how will you have enough teachers for both in-person and remote instruction? That's a question we're getting across the board, but I'm going to put that to you first, Misha, and then maybe our chancellor can chime in as well. How will we know that there are enough teachers for in-person and remote?
Well, what we do know is that we can't have people in 2 places at one time, and we got to figure this out. And this is the top of the priority list for all of us. And so when we think about the models, we think schools should largely be able to serve their students with the staff that they have. They've been doing it remotely, and now they've had time to really think about what that could look like in remote, part remote, full remote, or in school, or full in school. So they've been thinking about that. But we also know as a system, to the extent that schools have additional needs, we have to be creative and we have to support them. And so we're looking at ways to supplement staff, including redeploying staff with teacher certificates that work in other roles, both centrally and across all of our collective offices. And in addition, we'll be leveraging substitutes. And I have to shout them out. My colleague, Marisol Rosales, lifted up our kitchen workers, our custodians, our substitute teachers have been phenomenal supporting our rec centers, and we want to continue to leverage them as resources. In addition, we're going to continue, as we have been through this whole time, having conversations with our union partners, both the CSA and the UFT, to just really think creatively about how we ensure any gaps that come up.
Thanks. And I'm also going to pivot and just bring our chancellor in to talk a little bit about staffing and where we are and what he knows about staffing for the fall.
Yeah, so I appreciate that, Adrian. So look, it's mathematics. So if social distancing requirements require you to have less children in a space, that means if you have a number of students that come that say we're going to be an in-person learning, and if you typically have a classroom of 30, and now you can only have no more than 12 based on the physical dimensions and the physical spacing, then what happens to the other half of the students? You need another teacher. So we are pulling out all stops. Anybody, as our executive superintendent, Misha Ross Porter said, anybody that has a teaching credential, we're looking at what is that critical function that they have. And let me just be clear, it's critical. I mean, we have literacy coaches, we have coaches, master teachers that are doing great work, but this is not the normal. This is a new normal, and we are in crisis mode. So if you have a teaching credential, including yours truly, should you be in a classroom supporting in-person learning? Now, the caveat to that is, that's why it's critically important. If there are parents and families that have already said, and I make no judgment on this, but if parents and families have already said, we are just not comfortable coming back to an in-person learning environment until we have a vaccine, we need to know. And that's why we've set the deadline for August 7th. We need to know that you've selected a remote learning option, because for our principals, I'm putting on my principal hat, the principal needs to know how many of my students now have selected an all remote learning, how many of my students have selected a blended learning mode, which means they'll be in person some of the week, remote learning some of the week, because now I have to be able to program that. And then I have to be able to say, I don't have enough teachers. And then It's us that have to be able to say, how do I provide you with enough teachers to be able to do that? So this is a very complex algorithm where we need everybody to just be honest. What am I thinking? What am I doing? Where am I right now? I think one of the most interesting things that I saw today was a tweet on Twitter. And by the way, I don't really pay attention to Twitter, but this one caught my attention, where somebody said, I was contacted unsolicited by the Department of Education to see if I would be interested in being a substitute teacher this coming year. And yes, absolutely. If you ever expressed an interest in being a substitute teacher, you better believe that we're reaching out to you. We want to know, are you interested? Will you be willing to do it? Can you do it? Do you want to do it? Absolutely. We're pulling out all the stops to make sure that we're going to have the personnel in front of our children, if they choose an in-person learning environment, to be able to have a rich experience in that learning environment. Now, I want to make one other point. Because I have visited all of these regional enrichment centers, and I've seen what's happened in these regional enrichment centers, I have seen substitute teachers that have manned these regional enrichment centers since March, when we transitioned to remote learning, and have continued to be in these rec centers throughout 5 months. I have seen some of the most caring, grounded, student-centered practices. So just because somebody is a substitute teacher doesn't mean they can't do a good job for our children. And I just want to lift that, because I want parents to understand that there are some very committed individuals and adults in our community that have for 5 months now been performing this duty for your children and doing it from a place of love. They've had pajama days, they've had Valentine celebrations, they've had you name it. And because they understand that it's a service to our students. So yes, we're not leaving any stone unturned. We want to make sure that if and when the time comes, we have adults that are caring individuals that are going to be well-trained and well-supported in front of our children, supporting them from a trauma-informed perspective on in-person learning when that time comes.
Thank you, Chancellor. Along those same lines, and I know we haven't made an official announcement yet, but I'm hoping you can give us some of the thinking that's happening around our ICT staffing and what those classes are going to look like for our students in the fall.
Is that for me?
Yes, Chancellor, it's for you.
Okay. I don't want to step on anybody's toes. Look, we are prioritizing, and we make no apologies about this. There is an equity focus around who are the students that have been most impacted during this pandemic. Obviously, all of our students have been impacted. All of our families have been impacted. Absolutely. But we also know that there are students that came to us from the beginning with much more challenging circumstances. So as we think about in-person learning and what the next school year is going to look like, we are prioritizing services to those impacted students first. And again, it's not a perfect algorithm, but it's really important to understand that there are children that are being disproportionately impacted by this pandemic than other students. We're going to continue in that vein, and our ICT students are definitely part of those students that will go first.
Excellent. Thank you, Chancellor. So I'm going to ask the next question of Mabel, our Executive Superintendent of Queens North. We have a question here about childcare. Is there anything that you can tell us about what to expect in the fall with childcare? All right, we may be having some technical difficulties, which I fully understand. I've had some myself tonight. So I will ask that question of maybe Barbara. Can you tell us, what do you know, what's happening in Brooklyn South with childcare? And then we'll zoom out to what's happening central, because Chancellor, I know you have some information on this as well.
Thank you. So we know that the childcare has been an issue that we've heard loud and clear, especially when we're talking about the blended learning models. Certainly, as a city, we'll be looking towards our partners in this work of childcare. Certainly, that has been the conversation. The mayor has spoken in reference to about 100,000 seats for childcare in this aspect. And so we're looking forward to getting more information on that as well. And so we certainly understand that school is a lot for people. And we understand that this whole situation has just thrown a monkey wrench in the way that we just behave as normal New Yorkers. And so we certainly know that this is an issue, and certainly know that we are trying very hard to remedy that and to make sure that the needs of our families and students are met.
Thank you very much, Barbara. I'm going to turn that question also to our Chancellor. Chancellor, do you have any updates on aftercare, after school programs, and what that's going to look like in the fall?
Yeah, so thank you. Barbara was right on the money, but I will also tell you that the mayor has been very clear that we understand we're picking from a portfolio of onerous choices, and we're picking the least onerous choices. But we also know that parents need to know and have some sense of security in terms of what happens on the days that my child is not in-person learning. Where do they go? So that's why he's mobilized a cross-division team across many agencies across the city of New York to find a solution to this. And he's made a commitment to 100,000 placements. We're continuing to work on this. And I'm very grateful to our other sister agencies that are working on this particular issue. Now, that being said, we also know that we are working on early childhood in our community-based partners to increase the number of spots in those early childhood programs for students that can be in-person learning on the days that they're not in school. We also are working on different models for trying to address the needs of first responders, medical personnel, essential workers, etc. So this is a very fluid topic that it's working its way through lots of different decision points as well. Now, that being said, we also recognize, and I have, and the mayor has, met with the business community and asked the business community to continue to be flexible where possible around work schedules and adaptability as we go forward until we get a vaccine. So, one of the things that I think everybody heard about today was Google announced that they're going to continue their work from home policy until July of 2021, 1 year from now. Now, I know not everybody works for Google. I get that. But that is an example of how the business community is understanding the intricacies and the complexity of trying to get us back to in-person learning in an imperfect environment with changing circumstances based on the medical issues that are developing. And that's an example of how we're all going to have to work together to be able to continue to move forward in the coming months. So again, we're very committed to that. We've heard loud and clear from our parents. Before we heard from our parents, we understand there are parents that have no other options but to have their children somewhere. And we get that. So we're working diligently to make that happen, and we're going to continue to update the public as we have more and more information.
Thank you, Chancellor. We've gotten a lot of questions about the use of alternative space. And so parents want to know why can we not use offices, museums, parks, play streets. And so I'm going to start, actually there's a movement I think brewing in Manhattan. So we'll start with Marisol for that. Parents are calling for play streets and blocking off streets and making them available for our students. Can you talk through just what your planning is, what your thinking is around that? And then we'll turn it over to the Chancellor to give us sort of a high picture summary of what's going on.
Absolutely. So, what I want to say, not in Manhattan, but as New Yorkers, we're super resourceful, innovative, and creative, right? So we definitely appreciate the many recommendations, suggestions, ideas that we have received for alternative space options. Our parents are active participants in this process. They're partners with our principals. And so whenever they can offer ideas about space options, they're welcome. And so we are exploring all options as we think about how to safely maximize in-person instruction. And I think that is the priority. That is what we hear our chancellor, what you hear us talk about, how to safely maximize in-person instruction for families who really want it, and within the constraints of the space, the facilities, the staff, and the city resources. We will continue to assess and evaluate the needs, all these options, and available resources as we get a better understanding of how many parents are opting in for in-person instruction. And so back to the ask of making sure that we receive the information from families is going to be critical.
Great. Chancellor, I don't know if you want to add in on that.
I will only add to what our Executive Superintendent Rosales said. She was right on the money. But I will also add that our school construction authority is scouring the 5 boroughs for spaces that could serve in this function. Now, again, let me just give you a dose of realism. So if you have your local school, you're probably asking yourself, well, what is the ventilation? What is the entrance? What does the exit look like? What are the safety protocols? How much space do we have? What is the social distancing going to look like? What are the partitions going to look like? And that's your school. So now imagine doing the same algorithm for a new space that we haven't had control over. We're asking the same questions. So I just mentioned Google, and they've been great partners with us, by the way. But Google said they're going to continue working from home. So now they may or may not have some spaces that they have available. So as we go into that space, it's not just taking a whole floor or multiple floors and saying, okay, we're going to put a classroom in that corner and another classroom in that corner, taking into account the cohorts that we've been talking about, taking into account the PPE that we've been talking about, taking into account the temperature checking, the PPE requirements, the social distancing requirements. Every new space requires a whole new analysis around safety. What does the ventilation look like? How many windows do you have? How many people do you put in? And then are they even set up to be a classroom space? Now, most people would say, look, if you got a big factory and they're not coming back, so can you rent the factory? Yeah, you could rent the factory, but how do you create that factory to become a classroom now? What does a smartboard look like? What does a chalkboard look like? Where do students sit? What kind of ambient lighting do they have? What kind of ventilation do they have? So this is a very complex question, but to answer this again, I stay up at night thinking about all of these negative questions. But I will tell you that the public libraries in New York City have been phenomenal. They've been our partners. They've been our partners in creating some thought plans about what would it look like to create those alternate learning environments when students aren't in school, but they are in remote learning mode. Could we create the remote learning mode in our public libraries? That's the kind of New York, get it done, no excuses work that is happening right now. Now, I understand also that as a parent, if I put my parent hat, you're going to say, well, give me the answer. What is it? I can't tell you what it is because we're working through it right now. But I can tell you we're working through it right now. And in the coming weeks and months, we're going to be sharing all of the sausage making in its ugly and beautiful way to let you know how we're working through these decisions, because we want to make sure that parents understand that we're working through these things. And let me just be really clear. Everybody's going to have an opinion. Everybody's going to have a plan. But if you look at the plans that have been put forward by lots of individuals in our community, they're not plans, they're ideas. They're great ideas. Some of those ideas we've already thought about. God bless you. Give me the details. Give me the nitty gritty. What's the PPE look like? What does the safety and security look like? What does the cleanliness look like? What does the egress and egress look like? What does the multiple schedules look like? Then you have a plan. Other than that, you have a lot of good ideas. And thank you for putting forth those good ideas.
All right. Thank you, Chancellor. We know you're working night and day, thinking through these contingencies. We've gotten a lot of questions about what happens if a student or staff member presents with symptoms. And so if you could just walk us through, what we've got figured out, and then what we can expect to learn in the next few weeks.
So I'm going to keep it very general right now, but again, our values are safety and security of all of our students, our staff, and our families. I will tell you that there's been a lot of information that's been put out by the state of New York around what those values are in terms of what percentage of positive cases that would trigger certain activities. I'm going to tell you that we're going to be much more conservative than that, because New York City is not like any other local community in New York State. We are just not the same. So if somebody says, well, if you have 5% community spread, then you do X, Y, Z. Well, 5% somewhere else in New York City, in New York State, is not the same as 5% in New York City, just on math. So we're going to be much more conservative in that, and you're going to hear much more about those details in the coming days about what our plan is for what will happen if we have a positive case. What I will tell you is that we're taking that very seriously, and we're working very closely with not only our local medical experts, but our national medical experts, i.e. Dr. Fauci, to make sure that we're keeping everybody safe. Again, we're following the science, not the science fiction.
Thank you, Chancellor. There have been a lot of questions about funding, and I know a lot of people have heard about where we are as a city with our budget, and there's a lot of rumors going around. So can you share with us what's happening with our budget and funding, and what can we expect, and what do we want parents to be thinking about when it comes to budget?
Yeah, so let me be I'm being very transparent and very unvarnished about this. We are in a bad place with our budget. The mayor's been clear about this. Today, Governor Cuomo has said that the state of New York is at the end of the line. Unless we get a CARES Act and a federal stimulus package, he's projected up to 20% cut to local municipalities, which means in New York City, that would mean another $2.3 billion cut to education alone. $2.3 billion cut to education alone. So the economic, we're facing three pandemics right now. We're facing the viral pandemic, which is COVID-19. We're facing the economic pandemic associated with the viral pandemic, which is leading to increased defunding of all of our agencies, including the Department of Education. And we're facing a racial pandemic. We're finally coming to grips with the long sordid history of our country around how we treat certain groups of people in our country. And by the way, I just want to say this for everyone to hear unapologetically: Black Lives Matter. In the New York City Department of Education, Black Lives Matter. So with that, we have some very difficult decisions to make. And what we will not skimp on is making sure that health and safety of our students, our staff, and our families are first and foremost. In that regard, we are also planning very directly on what will remote learning look like, because should there be a shift tomorrow in what this pandemic is doing, and again, thank you to all of our New Yorkers, our New York City New Yorkers, for following the medical advice, following science, not science fiction. We've been able to keep the transmission low, but should this explode, then we have to be able to pivot in a very real sense. So we are planning on doing remote learning really, really well, because we've done in-person learning for generations. But remote learning, we've really had to build our skill set on that. So we're going to take the pennies that we have left and making sure that we're investing that in the professional development, in the academic development, in the resources that we have for students, parents, teachers, and principals, to make sure that we do that really well based on the lessons learned in these last 5 months, while still be making sure that we're taking and attuning to the trauma-informed approach for our students and our staff and our faculties and our communities, and the social-emotional learnings of our communities, because we know that we've all been through something we've never experienced before. But the economic outlook from this humble servant in New York City is not good. So we need to really continue to advocate for that CARES Act, because without that CARES Act, it's going to be very difficult for us to do what we do.
Thank you. Grave news, but thank you for sharing it with our parents, Chancellor. We have gotten a lot of questions from parents about scheduling. And there's the question of why not split schedules for morning and afternoon with all students in person 5 days a week? So if you could maybe take that one.
Great question. It's very logical. It's a very simple but not simplistic question. So I appreciate the question. Let me just tell you the bottom line. There is no way that we could have an AM and a PM session and have sufficient time to totally disinfect our school buildings. It's really that simple, because the cleaning protocols and the electrostatic cleaning and the wiping down and the sterilization of our buildings, we need an evening, and I want to give tremendous credit to our custodians that are going to do this, but we need a whole evening to be able to do this. So unless we start the morning session at 5 a.m. and then start the PM session at 4 p.m. and go till 11 p.m., there's no way we have sufficient time to adequately disinfect and sterilize our buildings to have 2 sessions, a morning and PM session.
Thank you, Chancellor. And we are coming to time. I want to give our executive superintendents an opportunity to say a few just sort of closing words, and then obviously, Chancellor, we'll turn it back to you. But Executive Supes, Misha, if you want to say a few words to our families that joined us from the Bronx.
You know what I'm going to say to the Bronx. Bronx strong all day, every day. We look forward to continuing to collaborate and stay connected. And thank you for joining us for this time.
Thank you. If we can hear from Brooklyn, Karen and Barbara.
I just want to thank you all for joining us this evening. It was great to be here with our Chancellor and you, Deputy Chancellor Austin, and all of the families joining us. Just know that we will continue to engage with you as we plan for the opening of the 2021 school year. So be well, stay safe. Thank you.
Yes, and I'd also just like to thank everyone again. I think it was a great conversation. Certainly the conversation should continue. Please know that we know that communicating with schools could be difficult because there's not one number to call. Please make sure that you're reaching out to your school's parent coordinators, principals. Certainly I'm available and the superintendent are available, offices to be answered. We want to hear from you. We want to make sure that we're making the right decisions based on your input. And so we continue to love being in partnership with you to support our 1.1 million students. Have a good evening.
Thank you. And for Manhattan, Marisol Rosales.
Absolutely. In my 27 years as an educator, as a mother, a Latina, and in my current role as the executive superintendent, I couldn't be prouder of our collective effort. As the Chancellor said, we built a new system when other districts didn't. We put electronic devices in the hands of children and families who did not have them. During remote learning, we were serving 500,000 meals a day. And so in these challenging times of loss and fear, we continue to show up as true New Yorkers. We are an inclusive, supportive community. And for that, I'm grateful and hopeful. And we will come out of this strong and kinder people. So thank you. And yes, let's continue the conversation.
Thank you, Marisol. For Queens, if we can hear from Mabel and Rochelle.
Thank you again to all the parents of Queens North. It's really great to have you with us in community. I know that you have many more questions. Please feel free to reach out to me, to your superintendent, to your principals. We are here to support you, and together we are going to make 2020 school year reopening the best. We need each and every one of you to work with us together so that our children get the best possible education. So thank you.
I'd like to also thank everybody and just to the parents, remember that you matter, your children matter. And I think that was resonated very much so with the Chancellor's message, and just continue to take care of each other and the community, because we'll come through this together.
Thank you. And for Staten Island, Chris, if you could share some parting words.
Sure, just to echo what everybody's been saying, thank you again to our students and families, and to the folks on this call and all of the people behind the scenes for keeping everything running through all of this, and always putting health and safety at the forefront.
Thank you. And Tim, Access Schools in D79.
Yeah, again, they say that in a crisis, that's a real acid test of leadership. And in leadership, we talk all the time about communication and collaboration and working together, and it really got manifested during this crisis. And I'm very proud of our team and our collective efforts. And I just wanted to say we're going to continue to work to provide quality educational and sports services for all the students, both young and old, in adult education throughout New York City. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Big thanks to all of our executive superintendents and representatives from the boroughs. You guys are our leaders on the ground. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you to our families who are with us tonight. I know you are starved for information. You want to know what's happening in the fall. We will continue to come in front of you. We will answer the questions that we can, because we know that it's important to give you access to information, timely information, to the extent that we have it. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our Chancellor to close us out.
Thank you, Adrian. I'm going to show you one picture. Look at this. Now, the reason I share that is because I know, most people are used to seeing the Chancellor in a suit and tie, the urban Chancellor, outfit. But this is really why it's possible for us to even have the conversation about in-person learning. Because, listen, I communicate with the largest school systems across the country every week. There is one community in the United States that is even in a position to have a conversation about in-person learning. That's us, because we have done the work to flatten the curve. So that's why I wanted to wear this shirt tonight. But in spite of that, I just want to say to you, thank you. Thank you for taking this seriously. This is the real deal. You've made it possible for us to think about the esoteric and not so esoteric conversations about what's scheduled, what does PPE look like, what does childcare look like. Other communities don't even have the opportunity to do that because their positive cases are spiraling. So thank you, New Yorkers. Thank you for what you're doing. I'm also going to give a thanks to Adrian Austin, because you may not know this, but Adrian is on vacation. She's worked 7 days a week for the last 5 months, never taking a day off. And she's on vacation today, and she's still here walking us through this presentation. So Adrian, thank you for taking time from your family to be with us here today. So we're going to continue to be transparent. We're going to be honest. You're going to see the sausage being made. There are no hidden agendas. This is what the work is, and it could change tomorrow. So I just want to assure our families that people have lots of opinions, but not a lot of information. And our goal is to make sure that you have the information you need to make the decisions you need to make. But we also need information, because we need to plan and we need to program, and not just a nice little suburban district with 8,000 kids. We have 1.1 million students. On any given day when we're in session, 1 out of 300 Americans are sitting in one of our classrooms. That's how big we are. That's the size of what our decisions mean. So we need to work together and not point the finger. You can point the finger. We're used to that. But we're going to give you the information you need to make the decisions that you need to make and understand where we're going. And by the way, September is coming, and we understand it. So thank you for your questions. Thank you for being engaged. I want to thank the executive superintendents, who I am so proud to call my colleagues. I am so proud of their leadership in this space. But I also want to thank our parents who have become adjunct teachers to their students. I want to thank our teachers. I want to thank our principals. I want to thank our food service workers who have never missed a day of work serving. We've served over 80 million meals to the citizens of New York. 80 million meals, over 500,000 meals a day. I want to thank our custodians who have kept us safe and are cleaning our buildings. This is a team effort. Nobody ever writes about that. Nobody ever talks about that. But I want you to know I am proud of the Department of Education and all of my colleagues. No one is doing too much or not enough. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for what you're doing. And we will be in touch again soon. Thank you.